And now we go to the latest bombshell allegations against Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. They are detailed, they're specific, and they are of a very adult nature. And I'm going to warn you, if you're watching the segment with your kids here, we're going to have some very adult content that's going to be coming your way here. We are talking about a Supreme Court lifetime confirmation. Now, as you hear the allegations, I want you to consider this. So far, there has been no change to tomorrow's hearings with only 2 witnesses, neither of which is the new accuser, and the committee still plans to vote on Kavanaugh on Friday, the day after, obviously, they hear from Dr. Ford. As for this new accuser, her name, Julie Swetnick. She, the woman being represented by Michael Avenatti, who has been saying these details would be coming forward before the Kavanaugh hearing, and they have. Avenatti made sure to cite his client's credentials so she would not be so easily dismissed. Swetnick, she worked for, and has active or inactive security clearances from the Treasury Department, the U.S. Mint, the IRS, the Departments of State, Justice, Homeland Security, Defense, and the Washington, D.C. city government. As for what Swetnick is alleging, let me bring back Andrew because it was stunning today, Andrew.
There's a lot here, Rich. Her statement is a combination of things Swetnick saw firsthand, things she heard secondhand, and heartbreakingly, things she says that happened to her while Brett Kavanaugh was nearby. Swetnick says she first met Kavanaugh and his friend Mark Judge at a house party. She described Kavanaugh and Judge as joined at the hip, noting there is, quote, no question in my mind that Mark Judge has significant information concerning the conduct of Brett Kavanaugh during the 1980s, especially as it relates to his actions towards women. Swetnick says all told she attended more than 10 house parties with Kavanaugh and Judge, and noted that, quote, on numerous occasions she witnessed Kavanaugh and Judge drink excessively and engage in highly inappropriate conduct, including being overly aggressive with girls and not taking no for an answer. Swetnick then goes on to catalog some of the behavior she witnessed from Kavanaugh at these parties. Another warning, this is where the details begin to get somewhat graphic. Swetnick says she saw Kavanaugh fondle and grab women without consent, press girls against himself without consent, grinding against girls, shifting girls' clothing to expose their private body parts. That Kavanaugh was verbally abusive to women, making what she calls cruel sexual comments, and that he would act as a mean drunk. And Swetnick adds not only did she witness these events at D.C. area house parties, she also heard about similar incidents during summer trips to Ocean City, Maryland. And then after watching Kavanaugh's interview on Fox News proclaiming his innocence and his lack of sexual activity in high school, she called it, quote, absolutely false and a lie. I witnessed Brett Kavanaugh consistently engage in excessive drinking and inappropriate contact of a sexual nature. Swetnick continues, saying Kavanaugh, Judge, and others would spike the punch at parties with drugs or grain alcohol to get girls to lose their inhibitions and their ability to say no. She says she witnessed Kavanaugh, Judge, and others, quote, target particular girls so they could be taken advantage of, noting, quote, it was usually a girl that was especially vulnerable because she was alone at the party or shy. Swetnick then goes on to relay 2 stories in detail. One she witnessed firsthand. The other, she says, happened to her. And I pause one last time for a final warning. These details very adult in nature and very disturbing, especially if you're watching with children. Here's Swetnick in her own words from her statement, quote, I also witnessed efforts by Mark Judge, Brett Kavanaugh, and others to cause girls to become inebriated and disoriented so they could then be gang raped in a side room or bedroom by a train of numerous boys. I have a firm recollection of seeing boys lined up outside rooms at many of those parties, waiting for their turn with a girl inside the room. Those boys included Mark Judge and Brett Kavanaugh. Swetnick adds, in approximately 1982, I became the victim of one of these gang or train rapes where Mark Judge and Brett Kavanaugh were present. Shortly after the incident, I shared what had transpired with at least 2 other people. During the incident, I was incapacitated without my consent and unable to fight off the boys raping me. I believe I was drugged using Quaaludes or something similar placed in what I was drinking. Kavanaugh, in a statement released by the White House, said only, quote, this is ridiculous and from the Twilight Zone. I don't know who this is, and this never happened. President Trump responded to the allegations earlier today like this.
They come out with what they come out with. It's a disgrace what's going on. The good news is the public is very smart, and they get it.
But
Okay?
do you think all the women are lying? Are all 3 women lying?
What's your next question?
No answer from the president there. The president also tweeted Avenatti is a third-rate lawyer who's good at making false accusations like he did on me and like he's now doing on Judge Brett Kavanaugh. He's just looking for attention and doesn't want people to look at his past record and relationships, a total lowlife. Avenatti responding in kind, tweeting, quote, Trump pretends he is a tough guy. He is nothing of the kind. He grew up spoiled with a silver spoon in his mouth and a gold toilet under his butt. He was handed everything. That is why the majority of America and the UN laughs at him and calls him a con, but at least Putin is a fan. And later, Avenatti tweeted to Trump, Chuck Grassley, and Lindsey Graham, quote, are men calling my client Julie a liar? How dare you attack a sexual assault victim? She has risked her life to do the right thing. You should be ashamed of yourselves. Your actions are disgraceful. Rich?
Andrew, thank you. Obviously, a lot to unpack about the new allegations, the state of the Kavanaugh nomination overall, and what we should expect tomorrow when the questions begin. And for that, let's bring in our panel. Former federal prosecutor Barrett Berger, she now director of the Center for Advancement of Public Integrity at Columbia Law School. Doug Von Oist, founding partner of Carson Von Oist, focused on corporate misconduct and selected by the Legal 500 as one of the most influential trial lawyers in the country. And Mayo Bartlett, an attorney at the law offices of Mayo Bartlett PLC and a former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at the Westchester County DA's office. You guys actually got to hear a good chunk of the president's press conference that led into it. He doubled, if not tripled down on his unqualified support for Mr. Kavanaugh, and moreover, questioning the believability of anyone coming forward, but specifically the three people. Barrett, where we are right now, I have the statement that Dr. Ford, her opening statement, she's made it available as to what she's going to say. We're going to hear from her alone. Obviously, the Democratic members of the Judiciary Committee will be posing questions to her and to Mr. Kavanaugh. We'll hear from Mr. Kavanaugh, and obviously we'll be hearing from the attorney that's basically going to be speaking on behalf of the entire Republican membership in the Judiciary Committee. We're not hearing from the second or the third accuser. We're told the FBI from the president last hour, they can't really do any of this. I think that contradicts with what we learned with, certainly with Justice Thomas and Anita Hill, but we don't have a lot of facts right now. We have a lot of accusations. We have certainly contradictory statements, questions as to timeline and all the rest. Legitimate questions, I think, all the way around. Do you think there's any way possible at the end of tomorrow, if you're a U.S. Senator, you can vote in confidence on the man Kavanaugh when you're talking about a lifetime appointment to the highest court in the land?
Absolutely not. Look, you'll have one data point tomorrow. We'll have a chance to actually see Dr. Ford. We've heard what she's going to say. We've heard it reported from different people. We've gotten a chance now to see Judge Kavanaugh, looking at us, face to face through a camera, giving his side of the story. But we haven't had a chance to actually, see Dr. Ford. So we'll have a good opportunity to see that. The senators will have a chance to do that, which is, a really important tool in assessing somebody's credibility, right? You get to look at them, you get to see what they're saying, hear it, take it all into context. We won't have anything about these other two women, though. We won't have any, investigation about their allegations. We won't have any other witnesses that may have valuable facts that would lead us to conclusions. I don't know how they could, in good faith, have a vote on Friday after only hearing from one of these three accusers.
And even if you're Kavanaugh, you will be tainted forevermore going forward. And if it was my good name, and this was all false and all spurious, non-fact-based allegations against me, people forevermore are going to think of me as the guy who on a party line vote got through, and at the end of the day, I was really a piece of you-know-what. I wouldn't want that either, and he's one of 9 and the swing vote conceivably. I just don't see from anybody's perspective how this works out by rushing through in a vote.
Well, and I've heard a lot of people say, well, what is an investigation really going to do? I mean, it's a he said, she said. But this is literally what we do every time law enforcement investigates, a claim of sexual assault. There are oftentimes only 2 people present. And that doesn't mean that we just don't do those kind of cases. It means that we have to do the real dirty work of trying to corroborate these things, trying to have, a really fulsome interview with each party to make sure that, we have every single fact that, can be drawn from this. So this is it's a typical kind of investigation. Law enforcement do this all the time. They do this all the time for old allegations too. So I think saying, oh, well, what can you really do on either old allegations or allegations where there's only 2 people here, it just doesn't hold any water.
And for me, Mayo, the window this happens in. We have seen seemingly every week there's another Me Too story I cover, and how culturally it seemed that there was an awakening here that, well, the way that the last generation treated these things, let alone did these things, it's different now. And we heard all these different voices, and there was collectively, I think, a lot of punishment for some offenders, okay? It's almost like all that went out the window. And now all of a sudden, and you, like I said in the intro, you're a defense attorney, you were a former prosecutor, you're in the biased crimes unit. This does not magically go away. There was affidavits for one of the person, and the last claim, and I'm not making representations, it's true or no, although she signed a statement to this, and there's exposure to her if it turns she's not wrong, okay? She's alleging rape. And she's alleging a pattern of behavior that she eyewitnessed from him and that he was present for, at least, if not participated in. I mean, this is not, kids rolling around in a bed in high school and, you got two different versions of it. That's bad enough. This is something of a whole new level, and it's like it never even happened.
Well, what we're suggesting is that certain classes should always be believed, and then there are others who believe certain classes should never be believed. I tend to think that it shouldn't matter whether you're a woman or whether you're a man. You shouldn't come in with just a presumption that you're telling the truth. And to Barrett's point, you investigate it. And most of the cases that I've been involved with, at least, that involve any kind of sexual abuse, there's normally only one other party. So it's normally the accuser and the person that's charged. It's not going to happen in front of crowds of people where you can sit there and say, oh, this is what occurred. It's not on video. You make an assessment of credibility. And it's interesting to me that President Trump right now is very upset. He says that Mr. Kavanaugh is this great guy and that he's presumed innocent and the harm that's going to happen. And he's the same person who took out a billboard claiming that the Central Park Five were guilty before anything, and we now know all of those guys were innocent, demanding the death penalty. So I think, though, that you do have several dynamics here. One is class, and that the more powerful people have been, generally they tend to be insulated from not just these types of allegations, but from the criminal justice system altogether.
But to me, Mayo, this is about a calendar, and it's about a political calendar. You have in 40 days the midterms, Doug, and then you could have a change of power. And this position we saw with Merrick Garland, how much political capital people were willing to fight for 400 days not to have a hearing or a vote because they understood the significance of this. And also to certain bases, this is what will be tolerable for them, for a president that they disagree on a lot of issues. Look at evangelicals. They'll overlook all the social failings of the president if they get a conservative high court. All that coming to a head right now, you look at the players involved, from the president, from the Access Hollywood tape, and the statements he's made and the multiple allegations against him, and the accusations going back and forth. It is, I don't know, we'll talk next segment about how tomorrow plays out on the floor, as they have these questions, but I don't know how, for anyone, this will have a good look for America, and forever I think it'll change how the Supreme Court is seen. Sure, it's always been political, but not like this.
Well, but Rich, the other side of this is that you are setting a precedent for what happens in a situation where there's late disclosure. The other side of this is you're protecting the process, that's saying there are deadlines, you're trying to encourage people, if they have something to say, come forward early. We can't drag things on forever. That's the other side of this.
But can I say, though, Doug, that's definitively a farce at this point, because for a year we had 8 justices on the Supreme Court, for more than a year, because they wanted to wait till the next guy got in to pick his person. So if we could wait for 400 plus days and have 8 justices, we can't wait another week or two to find out if these allegations are false or not. I think it's in the best interest of the Supreme Court overall to say, this guy didn't do it. This woman made it up out of whole cloth. She was X, Y, and Z. You may not like the guy, his politics, or you do or you don't, but this is not who he is. Vote on him in his merits, but don't worry that you're basically empowering or putting on the bench somebody that we find out later raped somebody or participated in something that nobody thinks is justifiable for an appointment. This isn't, a criminal case. This is appointment, a job interview. And you wouldn't hire somebody if this was on their record.
But Rich, people say it's not a criminal case. It has a quasi-criminal feel to it.
It does.
And when you talk about the exclusionary rule, sometimes there's drugs seized and it was done improperly by police, and they say, I'm sorry, we can't use this. This person's not going to be prosecuted. These decisions are made. There is another side of this, which is trying to protect process. It may get you the wrong result, but there is a reason for
and
that.
I think there's politics on both sides of this clearly playing out. This isn't only one way. All right, when we come back here, I'm going to get into what happens tomorrow, how this all plays out, the optics of it all, which will be hugely significant. I want to give a programming reminder. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., Fios 1 News, we will have live gavel-to-gavel coverage of the key hearing as it relates to the Kavanaugh nomination. Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, Judge Kavanaugh, both before the Senate Judiciary Committee. I'll be co-anchoring our live coverage beginning tomorrow at 10 a.m. Stay with us. We'll be right back.